Hey guys, that's Nate.
I'm Nate.
Hey, and we're here to talk to you today about DoorTex prop of our Vortex, and Nate's going to take away here with some of its uses and to set up it.
So real quick, we're going to do an overview of our Arizona Vortex set up in the DoorTex formation. So where this comes into play is more or less an elevator type rescue. One thing we talked about when we got the Vortex originally was having a good foundation of 3 basic setups, the DoorTex being one of those setups. So as you look here today, how we have this set up over this window is simulating the doorway for an elevator, and how we have it set up is in the DoorTex formation. Outside of its original setup in the tripod, where all the feet are planted on the ground, we have 1 foot that is extended through with our extended pipe that catches that header of that doorway for our elevator shaft. One thing to keep in mind, normally when we set this up, how we want to set it up is all of our extensions are on that second pipe in between, with our highest extension set on the top, and then we have our adjustability on our lower pipe. What we change here with the DoorTex formation is the extension pole gets added to the top of the setup. And what that does is it gives us the ability to extend through our manifold and extend past. We're able to plant the foot on the header of the doorway to provide stability and kind of an anchoring point for our artificial high point anchor. And then on the bottom foot of this pole extension, we have to use the Raptor foot because we only have 3 of the flat feet to use. So that Raptor foot gets added there. One quick thing I want to mention is adding the A-Zorp in. So we add this A-Zorp in. What that does, it keeps all of our haul system and our lowering system within the footprint of the tripod. One thing to keep in mind, this pin is marked with the pull tab cord right here. That's our longer pin. Whenever we use this A-Zorp, we have to have the longer pin so that that pin goes all the way through, so it's mounted to this leg of the tripod. One thing to keep in mind. Then we're able to run everything up, keep it within the footprint of the tripod, and our haul system is able to kind of go through that door right there, planting the foot into the header of the doorway. One option that we have that we can do with this setup, if we're unsure of the stability of the header of that door, or we feel it necessary to tie back, we can tie the system back. We can clip on to one of the 3 or 4 spots at the head of the manifold and tie it back to an anchor system that we could have in place that may be wrapping a couple studs, something that's going to give a little extra stability, providing the system to kind of tie it back and keep everything in place. Outside of that, we add our straps to the feet of the tripod, making sure we secure all that, and then our system will be built and worked inside of the footprint of the tripod. That's the basic overview of the DoorTex setup. It's one option that we have. Later on in the year, one of our goals with Special Operations team is to go on-site at an actual elevator, and we'll actually get to put this in play, hopefully with the use of an elevator.
So when we start to set this up, we got to remember our legs are all in our 2 long bags, and everything else we need for this Arizona Vortex is going to be in this blue hardware bag. That includes our pre-made tripod top. We can leave that connected, so a little bit of ease there, as well as all of our accessories we need with our feet and our Raptor legs as well in this bag. Keeps it nice and effective in how we need to fly through setting this up. All right, due to some technical difficulties, we get to start all over and set this up again. That been my bad. I kept the remote to the camera in my pocket. So we're going to run this again. A couple points we didn't want to bring up beforehand is paying attention to these feet. On these feet, you'll notice kind of this blue ring, a horseshoe ring here. What that allows it allows that pivot to be at a certain point all the way around. But when you get to that horseshoe ring on there, it allows it to go a little bit more of a sustained lower angle. What this is important for is when we're putting it above that frame and mounted on that frame, it puts it into a position where we can get the right angle to transverse that force we're putting on our Vortex into a position where the force is more transcribed to the header versus the legs and the raptor pull. So we're going to go ahead. Another important note we want to bring about this is when we're setting it up, Nate and I both are going to take this team on here. We're both going to go to both sides of this. We're going to grab everything we need and build the legs first, and we're going to start with building the legs and putting them into position before we brag the third tripod pole. Did there something else you wanted to cover in this part of it?
Yeah, so something to think about when it comes to setting up the tripod. Sometimes you're better off setting up with maybe 2 or 3 people as opposed to everybody jumping in and trying to help set this up. It gets a little confusing the more hands you add, so sometimes less is more. About 2 or 3 people is optimal when it comes to setting up this tripod. One thing I would do too is build everything off the manifold or the base of this. So we'll start with setting this kind of in place, having our blue section down because we'll build our legs off of that. And then the last leg we build will be built off the top gold section. That's going to make some of this a little bit easier when it comes to the overall setup. So we'll go ahead and get started.
All right, we're back up and live here. You notice how I'm bringing over here on my legs, I'm bringing the adjustable pole and 2 stiff poles. It's 4 pins, wasn't it?
Yeah, 4 pins. So for our legs, we want the adjustable pole set at its highest setting on the top leg, and then all of our adjustability will be built off of our lower leg pole. It's going to make it easier for those of us that might be a little bit more vertically challenged.
There you go. See, that's the correct terminology we like to use. DI.
I'm going to go with 1.
You going 1 out? Showing. All right. Communication is key on this too, and communicating to your partners or partners when setting this up and making sure you have a lead guide that sees the overall vision.
Now we're ready for our
legs. All right. Putting my horseshoe towards the middle of this unit.
So remember on our DoorTex setup, we have to set it up with our extension at the top because that allows us to plant our foot high above the door for our elevator. One thing to remember too on this center, this last leg of the tripod is incorporating that Azor pin, and Mike could go over some of that. Make sure you use that longer pin.
So when I grab preparing to set this the rest of the way up, and I'm setting my leg in, I made sure, since I am grabbing that Azor, to grab this other pin. And these other pins, remember, they're tied off. There's 2 of them. They're tied off with this orange strap. Make sure they denote that they are longer. So when we set this in, making sure we get this in a good position and locked in tight.
So putting this on. Azorp slides on from the top right here at this last pole. Slide it all in place and line it up.
Locked. 1 more pin. Making sure on my Raptor leg is I am at a position where it's going to grab. If I put it pointing it down like this, it's not going to grab. It's going to want to slide. We have a little reinforced tip here. What that does is it makes sure it grabs into whatever you're putting it down on.
Cool. So we have all this stuff in place. All our pins are kind of facing the same direction just from a uniformity and a safety check standpoint.
We're doing that good safety check. We're making sure our leg is denoted and where our horseshoe is on our foot at the top.
And we'll be ready to stand this up and put it in place.
All right.
Okay, you ready?
1,
1, 2, 3.
Don't worry about that guy.
And then we'll walk it into place. 1, 2, 3.
All right. So we're higher on that transfer.
Yeah, so one thing we can do here, you'll kind of have to play with and get it just right, is the positioning of all of our legs. So what we'll do is we'll probably go up 1 more notch on our side legs to kind of get this thing to swing into place. You want this head to sit as close and as high to the door as you can. So what we'll do to accommodate that is we'll adjust our adjustable legs on our sides by one spot.
Just remember what we have hanging from the top here. We do have this pulley in here if we're just doing a change of direction, but if we need to clip in with our beaner and put any type of assembly on or any type of hardware on, we are going to be hanging down a little bit lower than that. So if we are below the header a certain amount, we're going to get our assembly and our hardware down into head height where we're going to be banging our heads and have a limited space of operation. So
okay,
one up,
we'll adjust by one. We adjust off that bottom pole because that's our adjustability.
I got two showing.
Two showing.
Pin, we adjust, center. Are we centered?
Yes, centered. We look centered. Everything looks in place. What that did is that brought that head just a little bit higher and a little bit closer to that door frame for us. It's going to make that high point just a little bit more efficient for us as we're going down the doorway.
Remember, our load weight transport or transfer is going to be into our header above here. So everything's going to want to be pushing forward. So our raptor pawl is essentially here to keep the tripod from wanting to kick out. Our next move here is going to be putting our cinch straps on the bottom. What these cinch straps on the bottom do is it keeps the operational triangle, the footprint, into a more central location to allow to keep them legs from sticking out. Gain a little bit of length.
A little bit of length.
A little bit of length. So what I always do on these cinch straps is, you notice how we have a very long tail. What this long tail sometimes gets in the way of, it comes a trip hazard on top. So I like to position these as small as I can. I will tie them off. So and all right, tied on this far side. And all we do to tie these off is I've dipped it back through the same hook on the front to eliminate the trip hazard. Still got a little bit of a tail, and I'm going to tie it off with a simple half hitch.
That's the overall setup of our Arizona Vortex, set into the DoorTex configuration. Yeah.
So making sure we can put some weight on there. We can see all the weights going into that header. Hanging on there, he's a little bit off the ground, everything's solid and moving forward. What we can do, depending on space too, if we want to try to slide this out a little bit farther, remember we still have a couple notches on our adjustable bar right here, so we can actually go out a little bit farther. If we're worried about it kicking out at all, we shouldn't be, but there's a limited chance. Everything's going to be, all that weight, everything's going to be working over the edge of this. So everything's going to be pulling down and pulling into the header. If we're a little uncomfortable with what our header is, if we have to set up our own header, we can always do a tie back. And what we can do with a tie back is tie it to a couple studs behind us or some kind of anchor point apart from the system we built.
Yep.
So. And keep in mind, we set all this up in less than 10 minutes. And that is moving slowly or an instructional pace.